Good evening and welcome to our special February 5th City Council meeting. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Here.
Councilmember Engstrom. Councilmember Stearns.
Also here.
Mayor Pro Tem Wagner.
Here.
Councilmember Sutcliffe.
Here.
Mayor Mortar.
Here. Okay, I'd like to begin by asking any of you who are interested in making a public comment about something that is not on our agenda, either of the two agenda items, to come up and share your information with us if you are not interested in either item. Greg, please state your name and remember that you have 3 minutes.
Greg Messer. What I want to talk about, I gave a presentation 2 city council meetings ago about the census.
better.
The census for the, how to teach me how to talk into this thing, for the homeless census in Siskiyou County. And so, although the final statistics aren't ready yet, they'll be actually sent out or published by the COC in Reading. I do have our county's kind of draft information that I'd like to read. And this is by city that participated. The total number of homeless per the HUD definition of homeless was 160 homeless people. That includes adult males and females. Wairika had 90, Weed had 22, Mount Shasta had 19, Tule Lake, Montague had 7 each, Dunsmuir had 4, McLeod had 3, and then Doris, Side Valley, McDowell, Fort Jones, Granada, Costella, and Hornbrook had 1, with a total of 160. So just thought I'd give you that information. These are the numbers that were registered, that we actually registered, but there were observations by the people working out in the field where people didn't want to be interviewed, where we did a head count, and I believe the head count is not in those numbers, but that consisted of 100 males and 57 females.
Additional?
I believe that's additional head counts. One of the things wrong with the head count is different people were out finding homeless people during that week during different shifts, so there could have been double counting. We still have to kind of walk through the methodology that was used there. So,
Greg, did you say 100 males and 75 females? Is that what you said on the head
Yeah.
count?
that's right.
And then I know that we were trying to count children as well. I didn't hear anything about children.
No, these are males and females. So if an adult female or a male or a family showed up to be interviewed, we would count the children as children, but they wouldn't show up in the adult count.
So the 160 was an adult count, right?
Yeah, 160 was the adult count.
Thank you, Greg. Okay, any other public comment to be made that's not about either the community enhancement tax or the Crystal Geyser item on the agenda tonight? Okay, seeing none. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Yes, come up.
Good evening. My name is Gentle Thunder. I live in Mount Shasta. And what I would like to do tonight in this opening public comment that's not about the agenda items is to just recognize that we are here all together and to honor the train. To really not honor the train, but the train's part of all life and that we're all here together, and I know that you all tend to get a lot of verbal comment when we come to these meetings and a pretty big barrage. And I've really heard the the call for respect from your community. So I come in respect on this night and to honor all our relations, which means we're all related, all living things. So I'd like to offer what I have to say through sound as a blessing for all of us to listen from our hearts to whatever this has to say to you, including everybody in the room. Thank you.
Thank you. Just please keep it to the time frame.
Of course.
Thank you very much.
Of course. It will probably be even less, but thank you. If we could all take a nice deep breath together. So here's to all of us in this together, finding our way through breath by breath. Thank you.
Thank you. That was lovely. Any other public comment? Okay, I'd like to move on now then to our city manager, Bruce Pope. Have an announcement?
Thank you, Mayor Mortar, members of the council. You do have 2 items on the agenda tonight, the Crystal Geyser discharge permit and the community enhancement. Initiative. I would respectfully ask that the council reorder its agenda for the purpose of discussing Crystal Geyser wastewater discharge permit first. This item has been under consideration by the council for some time. It has come to my attention recently that there are still questions regarding the permit, the processes, and some of the regulations that one might want to consider in a permit. Therefore, it'd be my opinion that at this time, this item is not ready to be heard at a public meeting considered, and I would respectfully request that the council first consider continuing this item to a future special meeting. There are people that are not here tonight because they are assuming that it might be continued, and I believe there are issues outstanding this council is concerned about, and the public is concerned about, that needs further consideration before we hear it. I would ask that you act on that first.
So to make sure that we understand what you just said, you're recommending that we continue the item about the Crystal Geyser industrial use permit to another evening, that we're not ready to discuss it, that you said a special meeting, but is it true that it could be either a special meeting or a regular city council meeting?
It could be either. I would suggest a special meeting because it is a complicated issue and we need to devote appropriate time for it.
Okay, thank you. Is there a motion to that effect?
I'll move that the matter be
If I may,
moved to,
Hold on.
I support that recommendation. I think there's some issues that have come up recently actually, it's today, and I think that we need to address those before we consider this as a city council as a whole.
so move. I'll move that the matter be continued to either a special meeting or regular meeting as the, set by the city manager and mayor.
Is there, sorry, folks, we're still, okay, 2 to 3 inches from the mic.
All right, so I move that the agenda item regarding Crystal Geyser be moved to a future meeting to be set by city manager and mayor.
Is there a second?
I'll second, although I have a question about procedure. Does that mean the public comment is also continued to another time? Is that also, that's
Yes.
the procedure?
It would be, yes.
Okay. A second.
Okay, discussion? All those in favor of continuing this item to a future meeting?
Aye.
Aye.
No.
All those opposed? No. 2 noes, okay. Okay, there we have it. We'll discuss this at a future meeting as soon as we are ready to do so. I apologize for any inconvenience to those of you who set aside this evening, and hope you understand that we believe this is in the best interest of the city, at least those of us who voted for it. And I'll ask for your patience, and we'll notify you of when the item will come up again. So those of you who are here to talk about Crystal Geyser, you of course are welcome to stay for the community enhancement tax item. If you don't want to, you're welcome to leave, and I ask you to do so quickly and quietly so we can get on with our meeting. Thank you.
Yeah. They turn green when you're
When you speak loud enough, I think, no.
Sometimes there's a little bit of a delay.
Yeah, I tried it down. I thought you wanted me to talk down to it. Oh,
All right, so we need to be looking at the light, red light, green light.
yeah.
Okay.
So to be heard, it should be about like About like this? More like that. Just that-
There you go.
Okay, folks, it's a nice evening out. You're welcome to chat outside.
Thank you.
Thank you.
What's the first one?
Okay, I'd like to continue with our agenda, please. Those of you who are still in the room, please quiet your voices. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Okay, we're moving now then to the one item that's left on our agenda, which is entitled Revised Community Enhancement Tax Proposal. May we hear your report, Bruce?
Yes, this item was placed on the agenda as a special meeting item because of the county's deadline for submittal of the required documents to place this measure on the June ballot. As you remember, the council voted that they wanted to place this measure on the June ballot for consideration of the voters. It's a community enhancement tax, which would be a 1/4% increase in the sales tax. So in order to make that deadline, we have to have all these documents approved and submitted to the county clerk on or before 5 p.m. the 12th of February. We have, our next meeting is not until the 12th, so we put it on a special agenda item. Staff is recommending that the attached resolutions that solidify the language of the ballot measure and that the council approve these and authorize the city manager to transmit them to the county clerk for inclusion for the June ballot.
Questions of Bruce? Thank you, Bruce.
Question for Deputy City Clerk. The amended resolution language, are those amended resolutions back there in the back?
I do have copies of the amended resolutions, but you will have to amend them during the meeting.
Okay. Are they also available?
I can make them available if you'd like to see the wording, but you will have to state the wording loud for them.
Okay.
John, have you anything to add to Bruce's intro?
No, well, no, then I add something to it. But this has been reviewed with the state, and they were okay with it, and have been for some time. We had a little trouble with county elections, but they are now on board with this, so they're okay, and the state's okay. It's in your ballpark. One of the things you're going to be approving by resolution is the ordinance that would go on the ballot. That takes 2/3 vote, so,
Which, if you add up whole people, is 4 people.
yes, 4.
Okay, any other questions of staff? Yes, Paul?
It's my understanding, Bruce, that it's a 2/3 vote of the electorate to approve it?
On the June election, yes.
Right, and then if we decide to go forward in November,
Well, that would be the general election, and that is an alternative ballot this measure could be placed on. And that would require a 50% plus
plus one vote?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I guess I had a question. If the ballot passed and we did not do anything to manage that money, where would that money automatically go? Would that go into a general fund?
No, you can't not manage it.
I mean,
the money goes to a special fund. It doesn't go to the general fund. It goes to a special fund, and it can only be spent for the reasons set forth in the ballot measure.
And if I understood the meeting last time, there is almost nothing that it can't be spent on. Is that correct? Or what are the restrictions?
I would not agree with that.
Okay,
Now,
what-
it has to be used for basically community enhancement. You, as a city council, can decide that, but as we said last time, I think the electorate is going to assume that this money spent is going to be spent for community enhancement. If it starts being used as general fund money, I think you'll be subject to some pretty severe criticism.
So I guess I need clarification on what does that mean, enhancement? Because, for example, is infrastructure included with enhancement? Are salaries included with enhancement?
Let me say this again, okay? I don't know what community enhancement is, but is intended to be something that you're not doing now, probably, and it certainly would not be intended, at least as an argument to be a substitution for salaries or infrastructure money or things of that nature, which you're already using out of the general fund. So I think if you want to play fair with the electorate, and your successors want to play fair with the electorate, I think the assumption would be that you would not be using this as a substitute for general fund money.
Am I correct in my memory that the ballot measure says there's several youth and senior services and city services? Is that correct?
Why don't you read the question?
The ballot measure question.
So the ballot measure as it is before you to be considered to provide funding that stays in the Mount Shasta community and cannot be seized by the state to enrich our quality of life and to stimulate economic development, which may fund such programs and activities as the Sisson Museum, bike, pedestrian, and mountain bike trails, art, music, cultural activities, youth programs, job programs, senior programs, and improvement to city services. Shall the city of Mount Shasta adopt an ordinance providing for a 1/4 cent sales tax, result in approximately $250,000 annually, in effect until repealed or amended by the electorate, with mandatory audits and consistent community reporting. That is your ballot language.
So before us tonight are 3 resolutions and 1 ordinance that we will take in order. But before we do that, those were all in the packet, so those of you who would like to comment hopefully are familiar with what was in the packet. That's just a reminder to us that we'll take those in order as we proceed. So, see, this was item number 4. I believe I have one person who signed up early to comment, and that's Rosalind. Larry Stock and John Kennedy didn't indicate what you want to comment on. Okay.
Rosalind McCoy, Mount Shasta.
Louder, Rosalind.
You got it. Well, the wording is different that Bruce read that was in our packets, which is disconcerting since we're supposed to have notice ahead of time of what we're going to be discussing. It turned from jobs to jobs programs. And from the last meeting, I was watching live stream, that was great, that it really seemed like it could be misused. That we collect this funds and we tell the public that it's going to be community enhancement, but then we start shuffling money that we're already giving, $1 million out, to Siskiyou Economic Development and the Chamber and, okay, funds, dollars out. And instead of giving the money that we're already giving out, we're going to have this extra taxes, and then we'll shuffle the money into hopefully taking care of our infrastructure, which our infrastructure is in dire need for many years to have new pipes. And for me, I would rather see us have our taxes go to infrastructure, and we can donate all we want to and collect donations from our tourists to go to these different nonprofits that are seeming that that's what's supposedly behind this tax increase. It's, as our lawyer said, it is so broad that it could basically be funneled off to one direction or another. It's not clear how this money would even be moved into a direction. How are we going to say this one nonprofit's going to get money and this other nonprofit's not going to get the money? It's like, well, who can fill out all these forms the best, or who's friend? I think our government, our city council, our tax dollars should go for infrastructure, and these other programs should, when we have our basic needs taken care of, then we work on that. So I would object to use any of our funds, our precious dollars, to put this on the ballot. There's other needs right now than to put it on a ballot and say, oh, well, it didn't pass, so we're going to spend more of the public money to put it on another ballot, that it just pisses away money. And I've seen it happen too much in the city, that we have to take care of every dollar and not just use it because it might bring in more dollars.
Just a clarification,
you.
Rosalind? Just a clarification, I did hear the amount of $1 million. I think currently we're
Okay.
closer to $100,000.
$100,000.
Okay.
Well,
just-
100,000, $1 million, it's like, it's way too much. just to be-
100,000 includes the contractual money we give the chamber for the operation of the visitor center, which is 65,000.
Yeah, we talked last time with John Stacklep. We all came up with about approximately $100,000 that we currently give to private nonprofits. That includes the Chamber Visitor Center, Economic Development, and others.
Thank you. Any other comments about this from those of you in the audience? Yes, John? Please remember to introduce yourself for those who may not know you.
My name is John Kennedy. I live here in Mount Shasta. I've had a business for about 50 years here, and we've always come down to the fact that why do we keep increasing sales tax and driving business out of the community to go to Washington or Oregon when we're so close to the border? I don't know if 0.25% is that big a deal, but when you have 0.25% for libraries, 0.25% for this, and 0.25% for something else coming down the road, we keep adding these taxes on here. It's not really good, I think, for business here in town. I go along with what Rosalind says. This thing has a lot of questions. It hasn't been fully explained to me. This is the first time that I had an idea of what's going on. Your attorney doesn't even know for sure exactly what this thing means. I think, I hate to say it, I think the idea is a good idea, but I don't think you've studied it enough, and I think you should put the thing off. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Anyone else? Yes, Pam?
Good evening, everybody. My name's Pam Nerona. I live in Mount Shasta city limits. I, too, haven't had a chance to really look closely at this.
Can you all hear her?
Can you hear me? Okay, we
Closer.
speak close.
You can
Okay.
pull it forward.
Okay, can you hear me better now? All righty, so I'm not prepared to really comment, but something did catch my ear when our city manager was reading what the use of the tax proceeds would be. I agree that I think this tax would be good if we focus it more tightly towards enriching life locally, but to stimulate economic development, which means bringing companies here. You know, not so much for the Sisson Museum or other mountain biking trails, these other issues or projects that would be great, and we do need support for them. But I think if you're going to sell this 0.25% tax, if you can focus it more on working on projects that will bring companies here, that will bring better economic development, so that would help override the arguments that both John and Rosalind have given this evening. So my comment is to just see if we can narrow that focus and define what those measures would be in bringing economic development here. And maybe CDAC and DEAC, our two advisory committees, could help out on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam. Geneva?
Thank you, Geneva Oman, Hammond Ranch. I don't live within city limits, so I would not be privileged to vote on this particular issue, but I do most of my shopping in Mount Shasta, and so I would be paying that 0.25% sales tax. I'm not opposed to doing that. I would certainly not change my shopping habits because of this tax. My concern has more to do with whether or not it's really going to fund new efforts and new programs, or is just going to become a way of shifting costs already incurred from the general fund over into this fund. At the last meeting, about $100,000 worth of expenses that are incurred right now by the general fund were talked about how, oh, we could shift that over into this fund. I think it would be important to be clear to the public about what this is actually going to fund. The way it reads right now, it sounds to me that $250,000 could go to fund upgrades of the wastewater treatment plant, or planting grants for the new city well that the city is thinking about putting in over on the north end of town. And I think it would be a misrepresentation to the public to call it a community enhancement tax if it's going to be used for those kinds of general fund kinds of purposes. I would support an effort, I guess kind of in opposed to what Pam was saying. If you want it to be economic development, you should call it an economic development tax and not a community enhancement tax. My preference would be to see it go towards programming and efforts that help increase the quality of life for individuals and families and people in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Geneva. Yes, Vicki.
Vicki Gold, Mount Shasta. First of all, thank you for extending and postponing the other hearing. I really appreciate that. I think there's a lot that needs to be answered. Secondly,
Speak up, Vicki, a bit. We've got red flashing lights, which means you aren't being heard.
oh, okay. So thank you for postponing the previous hearing. I think that's very important that we have more information before that decision is made. Secondly, I didn't intend to speak this evening, but I also have concerns about the special tax. I love the library tax. I think it's very clear. It's something that I think the community majority obviously supported. When I heard Mr. Kenny say that it's basically something that we're not doing now, I was somewhat reassured, but still that language of that Bruce read of improvement of city services, that is so unclear. It's so amorphous. You can do anything with it. And I think the public will want to know that this is something that isn't just to be used for the example that was given previously by Rosalind, $65,000 for the Chamber of Commerce, $25,000 for SCEDC, that's $90,000. Moving those funds from the general fund over to this, I think it just has the appearance of impropriety when you're talking about community enhancement. They do a good job for what they do, but it is something that I don't think should fall into this category. I'm also confused about Bruce, what you said, that it would only require a 50% plus one if it's at the general election. I thought that when it is a special tax, that it would be 2/3 regardless of whether it occurred at a special election or the general election. So I'd like clarification about that, because I thought it was because it is a special tax and the use of the money. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's only if it's related to Prop 218, but I'd like to know more about it. And I'm not opposed to it. I'm a member of many nonprofits who would love to benefit. I'd love to support the museum and the Ecology Center and trails and, you know, all kinds of good things. I'd like to see better signage downtown. I'd like to see more beautification. But I do think this is a little unclear, and the devil's in the details. I'd like to know what kind of committee will advise the city council, because it's very easy to imagine that certain people will be given preference, and others that people just don't relate to will not be included. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I'd like staff response to the question about the special tax.
And I'd like to
If it's-
defer that to the city attorney, please.
I see you, yes. I did see you, thank you. I just didn't want to get too far down the road.
Well, it's a special tax, which is said to be, excuse me, it has to state the reason for the tax, which this does, community enhancement broadly, but that's what it is. And that requires a 2/3 vote. Whenever it's at a general election or special election, that doesn't determine what a special tax is. What determines a special tax is the nature of the wording of the tax. If you want to have a general tax, then it has to be approved at a general election, and it only requires 50% plus one. If this ballot measure went on the general election, with this wording, it'd still be a special tax.
So clarification, Bruce, so you would amend what you said?
Yes.
Did you folks hear that? It would be a special tax, whether it's in June or in November, which would require a 2/3 vote. Okay, thank you. Now, Jean.
My name's Jean Nels.
Loudly, please.
Even louder. Okay. My name's Jean Nels, and I just wanted to clarify what some people were saying about the tax rates. So in Dunsmuir, the rate is 7.75, as it is in Wairika at 7.75. The rate in all of California is 7.25, but most cities do take advantage of adding a little bit of sales tax for different things that the city wants. And one thing that I think all of us are looking forward to is a way, if this tax passes, for people to get these funds through whatever process the staff would decide is a fair and equitable way to do it. And we all look forward to that process, which will take a while to decide.
Thank you, Jean. Other comments? John, or are you just standing?
Good evening. John Adamson, resident, City of Mount Shasta, taxpayer. Problem I have with this is, and I got to start off to qualify this. I absolutely agree with John as to what this is and how it works, and that's with Bruce as well. I understand tax proposals. I understand how it's written. I know what the fine points of this are. A couple problems that I have with it are the ability to go ahead and shove it off into another area. That would be into the nonprofits. I'm looking at it, and I have a nice house. Subdivision went in someplace less than 25 years ago, a little more than 20 years ago, and the only time the city's ever worked on the street has been once. It's an infrastructure problem. I'm game on this whole thing helping the infrastructure problem that we have. That's good. I'm not game on paying for something we don't have money to pay for at the front end of it. You either have enough money to buy things or you don't. We got to take care of the city first, period. It doesn't go beyond that. So if you have a special tax and you're looking at, just for round numbers, we're talking about this thing might generate you $250,000 in the first year, to which $60,000 went to the election, okay? Bring that down, we're down to $190,000, okay? Now, the whole thing starts peeling off. This is arithmetic. It's not mathematics, it's not calculus, it's arithmetic. Know what you're going to do with it. But the bottom line is, if the valuations in my neighborhood, which are 28 houses, goes down because you guys haven't really stepped up to the plate, decided to take care of my neighborhood, take care of the streets and sidewalks, and you decide to go ahead and back somebody else up, that's a nice, wonderful, fuzzy feeling, okay? But it doesn't do anything for the infrastructure in this town. One of the things that was brought to me by one of the councilmen is the idea would be that there's a possibility we could actually use this money, which would be, again, $190,000 after the election, to go ahead and buy a bond. To go
Buy
ahead
a what?
A bond, B-O-N-D.
Bond. I thought you said bomb. Sorry.
Kathy, we need to get your ears fixed. Okay, no, bond. To go ahead and work toward the south end of town, to go ahead and start looking at infrastructure to bring people in to the landing in other areas. But you're going to need a bond to do it. You'll never get a developer. You guys know my background, and I'm telling you, you're not going to get somebody to come in and give you $4 million to go ahead and do that, period. If you get a bond, you can start. You have a place to start, okay? And at that point, you have something to work with. But I'm not interested in having a special tax placed upon me or my house when you can't take care of my infrastructure needs. Simple infrastructure needs that we need this year are going to be, I want you to tell me I got safe water, I got adequate water, and I have fire protection. And I can tell you right now, nobody here at this table can guarantee me that through July. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Jeff.
Thank you very much. Jeff Harkness, resident of the city of Mount Shasta. Just wanted to share a couple thoughts that occurred to me listening to others and also the initial introduction here. Two things that I am familiar with, having spent 4 years on council, is that, well, two things. We were always in need of money, and we were always looking at ways to do economic development. I think this particular tax does help both issues. I think a key point that's been well made here is that council will need to define how this money is doled out, how it's applied for, who can apply for it, and how it will be spent. And I think that will be a very, very important task, a first task, once this measure is passed. But with regards to infrastructure, with regards to some of our very important needs, I think it's also well within reason as you define this, as you figure out how this money will be used, to remember that we do apply for many economic development grants throughout the year, and I think this would be well within reason. From one of the committees that I used to participate on as a council member was IRWIM, the Regional Water Action Group, and we did apply for successfully and brought in over $4 million of dollars for water infrastructure, including replacement of the water mains from Spring Hill down. And I think the $30,000 grant, or the $30,000 to apply for that grant, would be a legitimate use for economic development. Siskiyou So I think that is one example. But there are also many organizations throughout the county and locally here that could also continue to help the council pursue some of the economic development activities, whether that be some of your own action committees, such as the Downtown Economic or Downtown Enhancement Committee. CDAC is another one, which is in need. The Beautification Committee, also another committee that continuously asks for money year after year. So I think there are some things some needs that are current, that are ongoing, that could be recipients of these funds, and we all look forward to having council define how these monies would be used once the tax is passed. So I encourage you to move forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeff. Anyone else? Okay, thank you. Time for anything else from staff to add?
I have
No?
one more question.
Yeah.
What would be an example of city
Need louder, Barbara.
What would be an example of city services that could be enhanced?
Water services, wastewater services.
Like, for example, what?
Well, you could improve water lines that are in need of replacement. You have certain infrastructure, wastewater lines that are deteriorated. A case in point might be Alma Street, and where it crosses North Mount Shasta Boulevard. We have situations there where periodically under heavy flows, that system overflows. It needs to be tunneled underneath Mount Shasta Boulevard, under the railroad tracks, reconnect the city system to alleviate that problem. That would be a type of city service I would see.
That this
Now,
enhancement tax could go towards?
If you have this money, that is one of the things this council could designate. What we have talked about with the council, if you approve this tonight, it goes on the ballot. Then if the voters approve the tax, then you at some point will have money to spend. We should clearly put together a process for council approval of when people apply, what the criteria is, what criteria we use to award one request as opposed to another, and set these priorities before we start getting applications. So everybody understands the process. What does the council consider? What's the criteria? So it's an equal playing field for all applicants.
And that priority list and criteria that is developed annually by a different council perhaps every year? It will change.
It can.
Can change.
That's up to the council. The council, and John, correct me if you don't agree, but the council cannot delegate its authority to appropriate money, so you would be subject to an annual appropriation if this ever actually passed.
Yeah, it's city money designated for specific purpose, has to be budgeted annually. I would presume you would have applications and process the applications. Should be an interesting process, but that's the way it would work. So it's all subject to your budgeting, annual budgeting process. And there was a discussion earlier about money that's going to the chamber and things like that. The money that's going to the chamber is, of course, general fund money, and I would think that if harder times came than what we have now, that type of discretionary money, just as the library discretionary money for the county was cut, so too would the city cut first those revenues. So there's no assurance that the chamber is going to continue to be funded by the city. I mean, so this could help in that regard.
Though they do have a 3-year contract. We have a 3-year contract with them.
Well, if you have a contract, fine, but at the expiration of that contract, you can't commit any of those revenues, other than contractually for a long period of time.
Okay, council discussion? Or is there a motion?
I think there's been some really great points brought up tonight. I've had many people come up to me and ask what the tax was all about, that they're not at all interested in paying any more taxes. So people who come up to me are very negative to start with. They said, I read the article, I don't know what that means. In my opinion, we need to be more specific if we're going to have something on the ballot. I don't think we're ready to put something right now on the ballot. My opinion is that we need to sit down and really brainstorm and where the best places, if we're going to ask for a tax increase, where the best places are we can put our money. There are so many, we have so many great projects that are going on, you know, Trail Association, museum, I love all those things. But are those the best places right now to generate what we need generated? We make money on taxes here. People spend money, I don't care if we lower the tax rate in Mount Shasta a quarter cent or raise it. People are still going to shop around, and they're going to shop online, and they're going to go to Medford, and they're going to go to Reading to save $2. Instead of thinking about spending money locally and helping our local economy. You know, it's all our part. If I spend $1 more for something in Mount Shasta, that's okay, you know? Because I know that I'm paying taxes here in Mount Shasta, and that goes to run this city. And I think that's an attitude that we have to start developing here in this town, because I don't think we think that way. I think we think, well, let's go get a bargain here, let's get a bargain here, and we don't realize what that does to our town. You know, and it's like John said, his street. You know, do you want to see something done to a nonprofit or a profit while the streets are deteriorating? That's a great point that people made. Rosalind made some great points. Everybody did. And it's something that we need to discuss further. I just think that we haven't taken a really hard look at this. And if we're going to do it, we can do it on the November ballot, because I don't think the way it's written right now, I don't think that the attitude I've heard from people on the street that this would pass in the June election. I just think I doubt if we'd even get 50% the way it's written right now, from what I've been communicated to from people out in the community. So that's it.
Thank you. Other comments?
Yeah.
I'm sure you will. No? Okay, Tim.
I concur with what Paul just said.
You concur? Okay. Tim? Thank you.
All right, so I'm the old timer who's been on this council for a bit of time, and I can tell you from my history, my perspective, my experience, the city has always struggled, as former Mayor Harkness indicated, with not having enough money to do this or that. We have historically not marketed Mount Shasta outside of Mount Shasta, because the finance director every year, regardless of who that is, would say, we have no money. Yes, but we need to bring jobs in. We need to bring businesses in. Our population is going down. We have to let people know that Mount Shasta isn't in Oregon, isn't in Washington. And we'd like to invite people to come visit Mount Shasta, live in Mount Shasta, put their kids in school in Mount Shasta, buy in Mount Shasta. Sorry, we don't have any money for that. We have talked for years of what a difference it would make if we could keep visitors in town for just an extra night when they come. Great. That means, are there events, are there attractions, are there amenities to keep them in town longer, where they want to stay an extra night or an extra 2 nights. Whether it is mountain biking, whether it is some art and cultural event, whether it is the museum, whether it is a sort of Commonwealth Club talk in town. Oh, that's all well and good, but we don't have any money for that. And we hear people say, wouldn't it be nice if Mount Shasta had more trails? If Mount Shasta had more pedestrian biking, hiking, more, if the baskets on Mount Shasta Boulevard, the hanging baskets were bigger, whatever. Well, that's all well and good. But what we've heard year after year after year is we don't have money for any of that. So the community enhancement and economic development tax, because it says community enhancement and economic development, is really a mechanism, a vehicle to improve the quality of life in Mount Shasta for those of us who live in Mount Shasta, and also to make Mount Shasta more attractive for people who visit Mount Shasta, and also to give us some funds so that we can actually perhaps go to the Bay Area or wherever and say, bring your business to Mount Shasta. This is not only a good place to live and work, we've got great schools, award-winning schools in Mount Shasta. We have safe streets in Mount Shasta. We have good neighbors in Mount Shasta. We have safe neighborhoods. This is a great place to live and work. So part of the tax revenues, if this ballot measure were to pass, and it's up to the voters to decide whether it will pass or not, could be used for economic development. Part of it could be used for quality of life, cultural arts and crafts, or not arts and crafts, arts and music and culture. Part of it could be used for beautification. Part of it could be used for downtown enhancement. Part of it could be used when we talk about, yes, it could be used for infrastructure, because we presently we would like to develop the old Rosebrook property. $4 million to put infrastructure into that. As John Adamson said, you're not going to get a developer to come in there if it doesn't have infrastructure. So it's a chicken and egg sort of situation. But if we create, and right now, anybody who has been with the city council or with city government for any number of years, whether it's 1 year, 2 years, or 4 years, or several years, would say, we currently don't have the money. A chicken and egg situation. Well, I've heard some people say, yeah, I don't want to pay for this. I've heard other people tell me, and a greater number, I haven't taken a survey, but people say, this would be great. This would really be the first time that Mount Shasta would have some funds to really make a substantial difference. If this ballot measure were to pass, we could really do some great things with it. It's not an either or. It's not spend money on infrastructure or spend money on trails or museum or downtown. it gives us some flexibility, and it's purposely written broad so that we have some leeway, because you don't want to write something so narrow that we end up saying, I wish we could, but we can't. The language is somewhat taken from City of Pittsburgh, which had something similar to this. And the citizens of that city decided they wanted to enrich the quality of their life. They wanted to provide adequate funds, whether it's for an event or for an infrastructure need. And I would hope that citizens of Mount Shasta would do the same thing, but we'll never know if we don't submit it to the voters. It's up to the voters to decide what they want or what they don't want, and some people will vote for it. Others might vote against it. But at least they have a choice. Whether it is on the June ballot or the November ballot, it's going to require the same percentage of voters to pass. So there's really no good reason to postpone the opportunity for the voters, for the community, and no reason not to let the voters decide on the June ballot. I heard something about $60,000 for the ballot costs. No. The approximate cost, according to the county clerk, is about $3,200. So that's what the county clerk says, that Colleen Setzer, who's been in office for a number of years, has indicated to the city, this is what it's going to cost to be put on the ballot. I trust her because she's the one that's responsible for making those determinations.
Just a clarification, I know there's a county payment and there might be even a state payment.
There is, and
So-
perhaps Bruce can speak to that.
Well, what it would cost the city to put, to
The
ask
city,
the voter,
yeah.
ask our citizens if this is what they want.
Well, based on the information that we received from the county clerk, the cost to the city can be a range. And it could be a couple of thousand up to a possibility, I believe, of 30,000. Depends on how many different measures are on the ballot and how that cost ends up getting divided. I think the last time this city, or a city, perhaps Dunsmuir put it on, it was a few $1,000s. Additionally, there is a fee charged by the state for reordering their records and their collection methodology. And that's a formula of, I believe, and John can enlighten us, I think, on this, because he did talk to the board, of a set fee that is divided amongst the cities with items on that particular ballot, and then prorated on a population per capita basis. So the larger cities pay a larger portion of the cost.
We did receive an email from Colleen Setzer, the county clerk, with her estimate as to how much it was going to
About
cost.
$3,000.
Right. And I think Mayor Harkness brought up a really good point that we all need to consider. And that is the opportunity that we have, or the lost opportunities that we miss in terms of matching funds. Most grants, whether it's federal or state, require a local match. It might be a 5% match, it might be a 10% match, it might be a 20% match. But I can't tell you the number of times that the city has foregone an opportunity to get some substantial opportunities, some substantial funds from the state or federal governments because we didn't have even that small amount of money for the local match. So it's kind of for want of a dollar, we lost a whole lot. For want of a nail, the shoe was lost. For want of the shoe, the horse was lost. For want of the horse, the rider was lost. For want of the rider, the battle was lost. And this gives us that opportunity as well. If the voters decide, it's up to the voters.
Could I
Thank you.
ask another clarifying question? Or
Sure.
yeah. So we're talking about special tax versus general tax. Now, let's say the council decides how they want to prioritize those funds. And instead of putting it on a special tax, we do it under a general tax. Could we do the same exact designation of funds under a general tax as a special tax?
I would defer that to the city attorney.
That's not how it works. Excuse me. The general tax is it goes to the general fund, special tax for special purposes. Now, if you wanted to have a general tax and provide special purposes, I've never seen that done. Maybe that would happen. I don't know. Another thing too is that the city council can put a measure on the ballot, so can the electorate. And the difference, of course, apparently is now, since recent case, that if the electorate puts a special tax on the ballot by initiative, it only takes 50% plus one to pass.
John, did you want to add anything to the discussion?
Yeah, as briefly as I can. One of the major problems with this, if it were to pass, which it will not, okay, there's no doubt in my mind that 2/3 of the electorate in this city will vote for this. I see everybody.
You have
And so,
2/3 who show up at the ballot box.
yeah, well, it's such a negative, I received such a negative response to this that I'm convinced that it's relatively futile. But if it were to pass, the problem is going to be, since it's so broadly worded, dilution. You're not going to actually be able to fund any particular thing well enough to accomplish anything. It's because it's really not that much money. Specificity would be far better. It would also be you'd have a better chance of passing it. And you might actually accomplish some things. Another problem is, that in a way of dilution, these funds could go inordinately to operational expenses of private nonprofits, and frankly, that's just not looked upon that favorably either. Tangible projects that currently are on the boards at many private nonprofits, such as the Siskiyou Land Trust, the Mount Shasta Mountain Bike Association, would I think inspire voters to vote for their favorite causes, and you might approach 2/3, but this is so broadly worded that I just don't think it'll be looked upon very favorably by people. And yeah, it may not get 50% of the vote. I agree with Paul there, so those are my thoughts.
Before I share mine, Barbara, do you have any thoughts you want to share, conclusions, any discussion items? I'm asking Barbara if she has anything she would like to add before I chime in.
Just quickly, I've been listening to both sides, and I am conflicted. And yet I agree with John as far as, we really need to sit down and understand specifically, what our priorities are. I think we need to really sit down and have that fair and equitable process spelled out. And it would be fair for the electorate to really have specificity, I think, too. I do feel it's a bit broad. So basically, I'm just agreeing with John right now.
Yeah, if I may, I think
Very
it's
briefly, thank you.
broad enough that the priority may change from one year to another depending upon the needs of the communities, the projects that come before us. This is, because it's city money, it's to be used for the benefit of the community. What actions, activities, projects will increase the quality of life in our community? What activities will help the economic development in our community? So it could be made narrower, but if we were to do that, we might regret it.
Some eloquent comments heard by all, including those of you in the audience. And for those of you who heard me last time, you will remember that I said this is a difficult decision for me, as I think it has been for many of us. I'm going to make 3 main points here, in addition to what I said last week, which hopefully has been captured and is known. I will say, just as a contextual comment, that I agree that the nonprofits in this community serve a critical purpose. A city is much more than local government. It's the businesses that contribute to the causes they most believe in. It's the residents who do the same, and it's the nonprofits who provide services that is within their mission. It's outside the mission of the city council. It's all of us together. Having said that, the quality of life piece, if this were to pass, I believe that we would destroy any public trust we had if we didn't give a majority of it to the kinds of things that were spelled out in the ballot. If we were to take a majority of it during our budget process and put it toward infrastructure, I think that would be counter to what the intent of the tax measure is. I think that it's a difficult call about the most important aspects of quality of life. What we're being asked to do is set up a process. I'm assuming it would be an application process that would have criteria that each of the applicants would fill out. What we're ultimately being asked to do is choose between which is more important: feeding hungry people or putting in a trail that will bring more travelers to town. I don't personally want to make that choice. That's a difficult choice. And I'm not sure many of the electorate believe we're the best people to make that choice, particularly when individuals can continue to donate to the organizations they believe in, as well as the businesses. Everybody who currently contributes to organizations can continue to do so, and it's a clean process. It doesn't involve those of us on council making those difficult calls. Point number 2, we have a budget process. We have a city priority process. This has been discussed for a number of months among a few people. You know, we can't have more than 2 council members join a discussion about anything prior to what you see here. However, it circumvents the city priority process and the city budget process. Now Tim will say that one of the city goals is to bring as much revenue in as possible. That's true. We all, as Jeff pointed out, as many people pointed out, there's never enough money, and we are looking at every possible revenue source. But to circumvent the budget process, which is tied to the priority process, it is not something I support. and it's difficult for staff to make the kinds of adjustments. We could probably find that money in the budget. It's not there now, and I will be suggesting, as we do our mid-year adjustment, that we consider an amount that would give us some annual match for grant funding, something in there. There are other things that we haven't considered, but this one, we have no budget in there now. Aside, and add to that the fact that staff has already spent at least 2 weeks on this, nothing but this item. So at what cost is that? At what cost to making progress on the other important things that we've already defined? Sure, our staff can be flexible, and we ask a lot of them, and they often are, but I think, you know, the old thing about the straw on the camel's back, which I never say correctly, I think we are pushing the limit when we put something on an agenda that's we haven't had careful enough deliberation around. And I know the museum folks have been at this for a while. I don't mean to diminish that at all. And I know you have done a Herculean effort at finding funds. So having said that, however, I still think, I question whether this belongs as a city council and city staff role. The last thing I'd like to add is just to repeat what our attorney, John Kenny, said, which is that this could be a citizen initiative. Those of you in the community who have allied purposes, you could get together and go to the work of getting those signatures to put this on the ballot, therefore have only a 50% vote necessary. And it keeps the city out of the business of deciding what aspect of quality of life is more important than another, which we would do every year when we visit the budget process. We would have to reevaluate that. Applicants would have to reapply more than likely, and it's a time-consuming process all around. When there is a way to do it using a citizen initiative, which is what the folks who got the library thing passed did. That's it for me. Thank you.
I'd like to respectfully respond to a few of those comments and share a few more ideas with us before we vote. We have heard from our citizens that our police officers are underpaid. We have heard that we have infrastructure needs, road needs, other needs. We know that our three major sources of tax revenue for the city of Mount Shasta are transient occupancy tax, sales tax, real property tax. We have heard that we don't have enough homes, affordable homes in Mount Shasta. And we've heard that we need more jobs in Mount Shasta. We have, for years, heard and struggled with the need for economic development. So we also know that it takes money to make these things happen. It takes money to support a cultural event or a community event that is going to increase the quality of life, contribute to the quality of life, to make Mount Shasta more attractive to come on weekends or whenever, to come to Mount Shasta to live, work, and play. It takes money to develop the community. And what I hear people saying is, we're not going to create that opportunity for our citizens. We're not going to give the citizens the opportunity to make that choice for themselves to create or not create. From my perspective, it's not an either or. It's not a spend money on this or feed the poor. That's a false choice. We are, every year, for the past several years, we have been giving a small amount of money to Meals on Wheels.
Because they're using a grant application process, as is the museum.
It's not a grant application process. It is a process where they come before city council. And we have a very, very, very small amount of money that the council can use for its discretion right now. This, I don't understand how this process of giving voters an opportunity to vote whether they want to basically have a self-assessment to improve quality of life, for community enhancement, for economic development in our town, to give the town a real boost, is circumventing our budget or being unrealistic. So I would, things come to my mind from past and future. We had a grant opportunity to change the old log pond down at Roseburg into a lake that could be stocked with fish, that would have a wheelchair accessible trail around it. It's something that Tom Hesselden's brought to us as a city council and says, I have this. All the city council needs to do is approve, maybe it was something like $16,000. Maybe it was $12,000. It was a small amount. And the council said, "No, we don't have any money. Yeah, that would be wonderful to have a lake down there and people can have a trail they can walk around and it's wheelchair accessible and it can be stocked with fish and people can go fishing there. That would be a wonderful addition for our community." But we don't have any money to match.
Another example might have been the annexation of the water bottling plant.
Right, the National Guard is thinking about possibly moving down to Reading. The city owns the armory. I got an email
So we're
today.
getting fairly far afield, Tim. Could you wrap it up, please, before we ask for the vote?
I got an email today from Nathan Johnson, and he and Roger Emerson have looked at that facility and would like to be able to turn that into a performing arts facility for the community. If and when National Guard decides to move down to Reading, they're supposed to make a decision this year. Well, that's all great, and that would be a tremendous enhancement for our community to have that type of facility available.
Yeah, but
Thank
Tim,
you.
that facility is going to cost millions of dollars to turn into, and this tax.
So I'd like,
So-
thank you.
so-
I would, so I would
Second.
like to call for
If
the
I can-
vote, please. Tim, you're using
So
examples
I'll move
that.
that the city consider resolution number CCR-18-001 1806, a resolution of the City Council of the City of Mount Shasta repealing resolution number CCR-18-05 and requesting the election clerk of the County of Siskiyou to place on the June 5th, 2018 ballot a measure to adopt a special sales and transaction tax to raise funds to stimulate economic development and to enrich the local quality of life.
What are you moving?
Moving
That we pass it?
pass resolution.
That we pass the repeal and replace. That's what that resolution is. That we repeal the previous one and that we replace it with the ballot language that's
what I
been read.
said. Yes, that's,
I will
I'm reading
second
it literally. Yes.
Okay, so,
Yes.
okay, thank you. So you're moving that happen.
That is
it-
what is written by staff as the item, correct, staff? Did I read it word for word? Yes.
What I'm confused about, John, is it's counter to what you commented on. Is anyone else confused?
I'm moving that it be passed. Now we're going to have a vote on it if someone seconds, correct?
Your motion would place the measure on the ballot.
Don't we have to vote on it first?
Here's what before you. There's a number of issues. One of them is repealing a resolution you passed that defines the definition. But the operative resolutions before you, the most important of which is a resolution approving the tax measure, the ordinance, which requires 2/3 vote. Then, so if you want the measure put on the ballot, you approve that. There's a measure then placing the measure on the ballot and a measure consolidating the election. I guess the concern was.
Is this not the item that we are going to be voting on?
So there are four items. There are four items, and we need to take them in order.
What I would suggest is that you consider the resolution placing the resolution approving the tax measure. That resolution has to happen, and it has to be approved by 2/3 vote. If you're opposed to placing the measure on the ballot, then you would vote no on that.
Right.
So that one, as I'm reading it, is the second one that's listed, the resolution calling for a special election to approve the ordinance. That's the second resolution in our packet. The first one calls for repealing the original wording.
All right.
So is that's...
Do you have a resolution in your packet?
Right.
Approving the tax measure? You should. What resolution is that? 1807. Pardon me?
1807.
So 1807
Let
is
me
a
read.
resolution
It
that,
is
among
a-
other things, would approve the ordinance that would be placed on the ballot.
And then if we were to approve that, we would back up and do 06, which is a repeal of the previous resolution, both of which would have to happen.
Yes.
Okay.
But what the operative one that requires the vote is the resolution approving the ordinance.
Well, I think that's the third resolution down.
Confusing. It is. What I understand is that there's the first one
Well,
is the
let's
repeal and
stop.
replace. The second one is a resolution calling for a special election to approve an ordinance. The third one, which we're calling 08, is a resolution adopting the ordinance to be placed on the ballot. And then the fourth thing in our packet was the ordinance itself.
Right.
So we could start with the resolution calling for a special election to approve the ordinance, which is number 07.
Let me read the title of Resolution 1807. It's a resolution of the City Council of the City of Mount Shasta approving an ordinance to be placed on the ballot to add Chapter 3.46 to the Mount Shasta Municipal Code, establishing a transaction and use tax to fund community enhancement. That is
What ordinance, what resolution number is that?
1807.
What I would suggest is you start with 1807.
Yes.
And see if you have
Yes.
two-thirds vote to approve that.
I'll move that the city council consider resolution CCR-18-07 as just read.
I'll second that.
There's a second for
07.
calling for the special election to approve the ordinance to be put on the ballot.
Well, I think the one that
I
was
think-
approving an ordinance to be placed on the ballot to add Chapter 3.46 to the Mount Shasta Municipal Code establishing a transaction and use tax to fund community enhancement.
Correct.
So you're moving that it be put on the ballot?
That is Resolution 1807, which was moved by Councilmember Stack, Flathead Council, second by Councilmember Stearns.
And so
Okay.
though misunderstanding, that is a motion to place the measure on the ballot.
Okay.
And that, Mr. Kenny, requires a two-thirds vote of the
That's
council.
correct, yes.
Okay. We've had adequate discussion. All those in favor of this resolution number 07?
Aye?
All those opposed? Nay.
No.
So that's a 4-1. 4-1?
I would prefer additional language, just to get a yes vote. More specificity on that.
For the record, did we have 4 no votes?
Yes.
Yes, we did.
Everybody votes. It was a 4-1 vote.
Or a 1-4 vote.
Or a 1 to 4
1-4,
vote, more
yes.
correctly, thank you. Not approving this.
So then we back up to repeal.
Well, you don't need
No,
to
we
do
don't need
anything
to do
else.
We don't need
Anything
to
further?
repeal the previous resolution. Okay.
Well, you can if you want it, but there's nothing to put on the ballot, so what's the
Okay,
point?
fine. Okay, thank you.
This should be the final, this should be over then.
Great.
Correct. You need a 4/5 vote to put the ordinance on the ballot. If you don't have that,
Okay.
the clerk should be notified that there's going to be you're not calling for a special election.
So I believe we're done. There's no need to address the other resolutions nor the ordinance. Is
Well,
that correct?
I guess for clarification, you could have a motion to direct staff to tell the clerk that the city council's not calling for a special election in June.
Yes.
I would prefer that we not kill this, but continue it and get very specific.
We don't
already
have
voted.
time.
No, but I mean, maybe not but maybe for the November, that we continue.
Start the process.
Well, that's for future agenda topics, Barbara?
Yeah, for future, but it's not on.
Yeah.
All right, I'll move that the city council advise city staff to alert the county clerk that we are no longer interested in a ballot measure be put on the June 5th election.
Yeah, I don't even think we need a vote on that because we've already, I think it's just giving council direction.
The city clerk would do that automatically.
I think for
anyway.
clarification, it'd be a good idea, if that's.
So you have a motion to...
All right, I'll second that motion as well.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous then? No. Thank you, and we are adjourned. Thank you.